Okay, good. So three themes. But first, so for instance, we discussed a lot about housing issues. We discussed about town and kind of local context. There's also other segregation issues. There's climate action. There's biodiversity, energy, transportation. We all have kind of like a big basket where we choose which grand challenges we want to work with. I think it's in our case, in Espoo case, it was very important that when we started to work with SDGs, let's say 2018, 2019, we really looked into the root causes. Why do we have SDGs? To like what kind of grand challenges do they answer to, etc. And we kind of locked ourselves or chose two. One of them being kind of the fact that we are many, and this is kind of the, starting from the Industrial Revolution, etc. It's been more or less a very kind of exponential growth. This is obvious. We are above 8 billion now, and then kind of the second thing we basically took from this Israeli populist historian Harari, the fact that our cognitive capacity is very much the same that it's been about the 70,000 or 240,000 years, depending how you count. But once again, it's just a few hundred years. The amount of technology that we have and influences our life is just incredible. It's beyond what perhaps one could say, perhaps a bit provoking, but still one could say that it's beyond our control. And kind of these two things are for us part of the rationale why we feel that whatever the outcome of these two root phenomena, we need to have a holistic framework that can take these into account, which is more or less the framework, the metrics, and the language that we use is then the UN Agenda 2030, the declaration, the preamble, and the 17 SDGs that Mary already introduced us very nicely. And just a few points from where we are at European level. No one has yet achieved the SDGs, not at the city level, not at regional level, and not at the national level. Then again, I think perhaps something we could discuss that for your workshop today, is it about achieving the SDGs, or is it about what that metrics and what that philosophy or mindset and what that vocabulary can help us to do in this transition towards more sustainable regions and more sustainable towns and counties? I would perhaps argue that the latter one is even more important than just fulfilling the SDGs, mainly because the world has already changed from 2015 and 2016, and we already see things that are not in the agenda and something that are still hugely valuable. But anyway, point being, and I think once again Rob was the person who said this out loud, that we have this in theory. We know this in theory. Our politicians, our citizens, even our civil servants know this in theory, but it really doesn't meet the action at the where the rubber meets the road. So there is a gap, and how to bridge this gap is a very important question. And last definition before we go kind of to the core is that I'm talking about cities. Mary was talking about island level and national level issues, a bit regional and local as well, but mostly national. Why does cities exist? This is also a kind of a fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves. That for whom are we doing this SDG work? And he said it boiled down to in Espoo case that we exist so that we are able to help people, citizens, find their dreams, and then fulfill them. There's three main elements. For us, the city exists so that we can take care of our youth, education, etc., and it exists for us to take care of our elderly people and those who are in need. This leave no one behind idea. And then, of course, to build competitive infrastructure and sustainably. But really, what is the heart and soul that is about fulfilling our dreams? Okay, so it's about how to localize the SDGs. And this is really abstract, and I just want to emphasize that now that we're doing this local work with the Sustainable Development Goals, everyone is asking the same questions. So we have a new EU level that started last Wednesday. It has 9 cities. There's from Spain, Portugal, Czech, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Germany, Estonia, and Finland. And we realized that we are all asking the same questions. And there was already some comments about the policies and politics within Ireland. And you can only imagine how it becomes even fuzzier when we go to European Union. And from the perspective of UN agenda, European Union and its instruments, which means money, are more or less designed and defined in a way that supports bulk innovation. And by that, I mean, they support this economic growth through industrial level innovation. And we very strongly believe that, yes, that is required, that is quite important, although it could be more sustainable. But in addition, there has to be a new way to look at things, and it has to come from bottom up. It has to start from a city level and from citizen level, and then go to national level and into EU level. And there are no policies for this at the moment. And my argument is that perhaps the UN agenda could be that framework that can support this. And this is what we are trying to do. Second last slide, just showing the process that I think Mary already kind of set the foundation to, is that Ireland is doing a voluntary national review now, and that's more or less obligatory. At least it's standardized. There's a manual for that. There's another process. It's called the voluntary local review. I don't know how familiar that is to us here in the audience. It's not standardized. It's much about, it's the first step to any city or town or kind of a region to do a mapping of their progress with the SDGs. And listening to Mary and the discussion earlier, I kind of heard that you are very close into like scaling the voluntary local review in Ireland. Because if the CSO is able to provide with data that is town or county level, that means that's more or less voluntary local review. And my question is that what happens after that? That what happens after you know where you are? So how do you start creating future foresight to where you want to be and where you need to be? And I think that's kind of perhaps one of the reasons why we are here today, is to have that dialogue, that interaction, that how do we create that vision, that future foresight. And this is at least what we are now trying or starting to do in a structured way in Espoo. And actually, there's a Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Environment has resourced us to scale this to Finnish municipalities. There's 309 municipalities in Finland, many of them quite small. So how do we create a holistic strategy that takes into all the dimensions of sustainability into consideration? This is kind of like the question that we are asking. And we believe that the data that the CSO has in Irish case, and in Finland is the statistical office also, is the basis. And we need to make that into a municipal level indicator set. And that cannot be too complex. It cannot be something like 169 targets or 230 indicators. It has to be more or less like 40 targets and indicators. That's at least what we are aiming towards. And then kind of that dialogue together with your citizens, your community, with your politicians as well, at least in our case, you kind of converge the present state analysis and the future foresight into a strategy that you can implement. In Espoo, we call it the Espoo story. But this is more or less the picture and the process that we are now implementing in Espoo, in Finland, and within these nine cities in Europe. And I'm hoping that it will be interesting for you as well. While the discussion was going on, I tried to listen very carefully, and I also created a really kind of short and sweet a picture about what I heard. And from my perspective, really what Mary has is a wonderful like a pool of data that of course needs a lot of work so that it can be taken into a county level or town level. And even then you have to like very carefully think what is really important for us and what's something that less important that we don't need now. And I would, as a city, I would kind of like think it as I don't know if some of you eat Mexican food. I tend to like it. It's like you have this like a fajita or something, then you put different mixes into it. And perhaps this discussion about indicators and metrics in general is that in the case of Finland, we want to have like a plate that has, let's say, every municipality has 5 say dishes on the plate. And then, since you have, like 30 different dishes, then you can choose whatever you want as extra. But we want to have so that the 309 municipalities all share these 5. And that's like that because that's then something you can compare and use to benchmark, bench learn, and bench act as well. So that's more or less the idea. And from my perspective, I see that there's a huge opportunity for Ireland to take this path at the local level, to also use the voluntary local review as kind of not just as a stepping stone. It has value in itself as a process, but as kind of like the first step in a longer process going towards more holistic sustainability. Yeah, these are my 5 pennies at the moment.